What's up, TUMNAD Lectures? In this video, we are going to be looking at what we call the anatomy of the liver. In the previous videos, we have been looking at what we call the theoretical part of the liver. We saw the different views, the anterior view, the posterior view, and we were able to see different structures in different views. Now, in today's video, we are going to be focusing on what we call the practical part of what we call the liver. But please, if you find it helpful at the end of it all, make sure you like the video, comment down in the comment section, and then subscribe. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, this one here is going to be what we call the model of the human liver, okay? It's going to be the model of the human liver, and you can see that we said that it's going to be dark reddish brown, okay? It is a dark reddish brown, which is going to be the largest gland in the body, and even also what we call the largest internal organ in the body. It accounts about 2% of the entire total body weight of the human body, and even also the liver is going to be weighing approximately 1.5 kilograms, and even of course it varies for the case of male and then female. In male, it is a bit slightly heavier, approximately around 1.6 kilograms, while in females, just generally around 1.3 kilograms. That's generally in weight, okay? But an average is going to be close to around 1.5 kilograms, okay? That's for a normal adult, okay? Now, we said that the liver is going to be residing within what we call the right hypochondriac region, with some portion extending to what we call the epigastric region, with even a small part of the left lobe going into what we call the left hypochondriac region. So now, generally, the liver is going to be occupying three regions within what we call the abdomen, okay? So now we are going to be looking at the anatomy of what we call the liver. So now this is the anatomical position, okay? This is anatomical makeup or holding it in the anatomical position. This is how it's supposed to be located in what we call the human body. But of course, it's going to be on the right hypochondriac region, okay? So it should have these two lobes which are going to be facing you, okay? Well, okay, so now let's go ahead and see. When we talk of the lobes of the liver, we talk that the liver has around, is divided into 4 lobes. So we need to first understand how are we going to be naming those lobes? Where do we find those lobes, okay? So now this one here is going to be the anterior view of what we call the liver, okay? This is the anterior view of the liver. And then this side here is going to be the posterior view, or which we call the visceral view of what we call the liver, okay? So now, when we look at the anterior view of the liver, we have some structures which are going to be seen. So now I want to look at the lobes of the liver, which can be seen on what we call the anterior view. So now, when you see this this portion here, this one here is what we call the right lobe of the liver, okay? It's what we call the right lobe of the liver. And then this one, the small one here, this one is what we call the left lobe of the liver, okay? Now, the right lobe of the liver is separated from the left lobe of the liver by the ruminant, this ligament. You know how this ligament is called? This ligament here is what we call the falciform ligament, okay? Super very important in differentiating between the right lobe and even also what we call the left lobe. So now we have seen right lobe, left lobe. Now, other lobes are going to be seen on the visceral view, or what we call the posterior view. So now, when you turn this liver the other way around, they are going to be seeing now other more lobes. What are these lobes? We have this lobe here. Okay, this lobe here, which is like a tail. Okay, this lobe here is going to be next to this big kind of the vein. You know how this vein is called? This vein here is what we call the inferior vena cava. Okay, so now this lobe, which is going to be located on what we call between the inferior vena cava and this kind of ligament. This kind of ligament here is super very important. You know how this ligament is called? This one here. This kind of the ligament here is what we call ligamentum venosum. And if you remember, during fetal life, we used to have what we call the ductus venosus, which used to pass from here, and then it shunts the blood into the inferior vena cava. But when a baby is born, it becomes a ruminant tissue, which is what we call the ligamentum venosum. This lobe here is what we call the caudate lobe, okay? Caudate means tail, it's like a tail, okay? So now this is going to be our third lobe. Then we also have the fourth lobe here, just between this kind of the ligament and this green structure. Now, we also have this ligament here. This ligament here is super very important. You know how this ligament is called? This ligament here is what we call the ligamentum teres. Okay, is what we call the ligamentum teres. It can also be called the round ligament. Okay, and during fetal life, we used to have some umbilical veins passing here. Okay, but after the baby is born, it becomes a fibrotic tissue which we call a ligamentum teres. Then this structure here is what we call the gallbladder. Super very important in concentrating and storing what we call the bile. So now this kind of the lobe that is going to be residing between the gallbladder and what we call ligamentum teres. This lobe is what we call the quadrate lobe. The fact it's called quadrate lobe. Quadrate means four, so that's why we're going to be having like a four-sided structure. Okay. So now this structure, this lobe is what we call the quadrate lobe. So it is quadrate lobe, caudate lobe, left lobe, and then right lobe. Super very important. Okay.